Hey everyone, last week Anthropic launched Claude Managed Agents. So now you can, instead of using the Messages API directly, just deploy an agent through a system prompt, connecting tools, setting up an environment, and you can have fully managed infra for agents.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's very similar to how we've been seeing a lot of people use the Claude Agents SDK. They start to kind of wrap a prompt around it, wrap a few other things, and send it into the background to do whatever they need it to do.
Yeah. And there's two ways to create a agent or a Claude Managed Agent. One is through their guided UX, which we'll walk through, and then two is directly through the CLI and code, which Diamond will walk through.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that can be done with code-first approaches. Anthropic knows this. Claude their use of Claude in general is really pushing code first as the way into everything else, which is a big reason why I think they really invested initially a lot in make it super easy to do code first with a small amount of UI for other options.
The way they're talking about managed agents is very opinionated, specifically what parts are separate from another. So they have a few core concepts. One is the agent itself. To Anthropic, the agent is the model, the system prompt, the tools, and the skills in the related MCP servers. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have a separate piece, which is the environment. The environment is the actual container itself, the allowed network access, and any packages that are related to that environment.
Yeah, and in some ways, the credentials are a third part, really, because you have the vault kind of split from the other two.
Yeah.
And it really depends on if you think that that's the right way to do it for yourself, but this is how they're asking people to do this split right now.
So when you have the agent and the environment, and then you kick off a session in that, at that time you can inject the credentials, and then you have a running agent.
Yeah, and we should check it out. We can talk through what we're liking, what's going, what we think they'll be improving fast on. You know how Anthropic is. They've got their agents working in the background to keep improving, so I'm sure we'll see a lot more coming out soon. And what are things that, as people who build and use a lot of managed agent platforms, what are things that we're seeing that people are liking already?
I can talk about what I'm liking and what I'm seeing in Claude Managed Agents that makes a lot of sense. One is it's all in one place. You just define the system prompt, the connected tools. It's very nice to just set up the credentials. They do all their credentialings through OAuth primarily, so you can quickly just click an auth for Slack, for Linear, for any provided tools that they have. It's very easy to set up. There's a flip side to that, which is when you provide those OAuth credentials, it's readily available in the agent, which means anyone who has access to the platform and can invoke those agents effectively has access to those tools. So there's something of a missing, I'm going to say primitive or permissioning model here, but they make it very clear in the UX, and we'll show you in a second, that every time you push a credential, you have to click a checkbox that says, I authorize this, or I'm aware that this could potentially give access to other folks in the organization.
Yeah, and there are a number of startups that are really thinking about what does it mean to give auth for agents versus auth for the human, but we're not quite there yet. So this is why I can see Anthropic just going forward with use the current auth processes, and let's see how it goes.
Yeah, and Anthropic feels strongly that they're separating the brain from the hands.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on just environment versus the agent and the model?
I think it's an interesting approach. I think we'll have to see how it gets used. I can see the argument for have different types of agents that might use the same environment. Many agents working across the exact same environment, even many of the same agents scaling up and down using the same environment.
Yeah.
But I guess my initial instinct prior to this was just to put them all together. Because many times I just have one-to-one mapping of agent to environment, but it's probably because we're very early in this world of letting agents to do a lot of stuff for us.
The nice part of the detached model is you can spin up and tear down the specific parts, which clearly is a benefit, but it creates complexity. I think the part that's a little unclear is they've said and they've expressed what the sandboxes are, but it's unclear where the harness is. Are they running this on their own containers themselves for your agent, or is this a shared infra that's just spawning and you're just leveraging the model as is? I think that part is a little unclear.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of the reason for this is so that people can use their own environment for actions that take place. And it's okay for Anthropic to run Claude agent SDK and the model wherever they need to.
Yeah.
And then it can reach into your own infrastructure, take an action inside of a sandbox that's sitting inside your own environment, not even their own. We can see in the UI right now, the default and the only option right now is just the cloud environment. But they've already said in their own writing that they made it easy for people to plug in their own environments as well.
One trade-off by using Claude Managed Agents is the whole stack is Claude.
Sure.
So you're not able to swap parts of the layer. So you can't say I want to use a different model or a different framework or a different sandbox. So that's like one thing to consider is if I'm running LangGraph, Pydantic at the model at the framework layer, I can't easily swap things. So that's like one trade-off decision when using specifically everything in this stack.
You're certainly betting on a single lab and a single stack. I think that's okay for many, many companies that are bought all into using Claude every single day. And you can still swap models within Anthropic. But yes, you are not going to have quite as much control as you may have if you allow a more open environment. Beyond the work that we're doing, we've seen LangChain has their open approach to doing this kind of work. And that's been really something that they're pushing. So it's nice that there are other options out there too.
Another piece to even consider is you're not even just locked into just using Anthropic, but even the models served by Anthropic. You're not really allowed to use an AWS hosted version of Anthropic models or Azure hosted models. We'll see if that changes.
I expect that to change.
Yeah.
I think given the partnerships and how nice it's been to be able to use things through like places like Bedrock, I fully expect that'll be something that is just built on in the future.
Yeah, given that you can use Copilot Cowork, perhaps something in the future is Copilot Managed Claude Agents. We'll see.
Yeah, there's no reason. Yeah. The only thing that might stop that is business reasons, so I'm not really worried about that one.
Okay, so that's an overview of what Claude Managed Agents is. Let's dive into what it looks like to use the guided experience and the experience through the CLI in code. So here we're in Claude Console and I'm going through the quick create flow, and I can either just immediately describe the agent or I can use one of these templates. I'm actually going to go ahead and walk through this example of using their incident commander template. And I just want to show you how easy it is to one, set up the agent, the environment, and the credentials. It's a guided experience where you're chatting with Claude. It's immediately created the agent, which is really the description, the system prompt, the tools itself in just one YAML file. I'll just set up the environment, which is, again, the container, the network access, and what was their thing? Well, let's see what it shows us.
I'm forgetting.
Yeah. So I'm going to create a new environment here. And in this case, I'll just keep it unrestricted, but it's important to note that they are letting you limit the network connectivity here, which is important for a lot of security teams.
Yeah, there's actually a third one that's not visible there when you're doing that. It's limited for MCP access versus limited completely. Okay. Because many times, like we've seen talking to various security groups, you might want your agents to not have just general internet access because you don't want them to be sending your credentials to anyone or doing anything like that. But you might still need to use an MCP server that does have, remote MCP server, access your Datadog account, access other things that are not, local to your agent as well. So it's not a complete concealed lockdown.
Yeah. And I just remembered the third thing is packages. So if you wanted to give it specific pip install packages, specific. I think another interesting thing is regardless of what you're using, they're allowing you to install packages across Go, Rust. I'm actually not sure how that works.
Well, this is your sandbox environment. So this makes sense, right?
Okay.
This is, again, where back to decoupling the brain and the hands kind of thing. If you're running a bunch of code that does certain things inside of this environment, it needs to have the dependencies that you need to run that code, right? If we're trying to run our own code base, we would need a lot of different dependencies inside that same sandbox. Yeah. I do also expect that going forward, they'll give you even more controls over different containers you might want to use, different more CPU, more GPU on anything like that as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, moving forward, I had Slack set up originally, so it went ahead and just asked me what channel to push for. Okay, so here you'll actually see this item here, which is, it's telling me that these are shared across a workspace. So this is what I was talking about around, they're making it very, very clear that these vaults though they're using OAuth, anyone who has access via API gets access to those effectively tools you own via OAuth.
Yeah, anyone within your organization.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new vault, and the vault is what will house all the credentials. And now we're going to go through this flow of setting up OAuth.
I acknowledge this is where you know that their security team must have gotten involved, even though they're very fast developers. I'm sure their lawyers or their security team was like, "Hey, you gotta add this one little check right there."
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge, and what you'll see is I go through this OAuth flow of connecting with the third-party tool, which is really nice. I won't do it for Sentry because I don't use Sentry, but I can set that up again at a different time, and then I'll go through this for every single tool. And we'll get to the next part, which is how are sessions even managed?
Yep.
I think it's important to note that this is very much still chat and text-based.
Text-based, yes.
So you're giving an open prompt of I'm just invoking this agent as if it was a chatbot, as opposed to like structured inputs and outputs.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways around that, but yes, I think that they made a very interesting choice where the session stays open by default. So it's expecting an ongoing session. So it's like you run the first one, and then you can go and send another message. You can send another message. You can send another message. So it's not a completely send a task and then it's just done.
So in this case, I can directly just message the agent that kicks off that session, and I'll have that back and forth. And maybe we just take a bit of time to talk about how we even talk to these agents. They have the sessions endpoint. They have like an interrupt handler. Anything you want to add around just like how to actually manage and invoke these agents?
Yeah, there's a lot of assumption here around the UX, which is that this is a code first product. This is a product made for people who are right now. I would bet good money that they're about to drop their own, lovable type layer on top of this for anyone who doesn't need that. But this initial managed product is made for, hey, I'm going to go and set this thing up, and I'm going to plug it in as a background agent to my front end. Yeah. So we know that there are folks like Notion who already started doing that. They use Notion as the front end, the Notion agent UI, and in the back end, it's all running on Anthropic's platform. Yeah. So there is an assumption that this is all through API.
Yeah. One thing I'll just highlight is what it actually looks like to view a session. So here's a coding agent that I designed, and the output was posted to Slack. So, in this case, very simple Fibonacci sequence. You can see the trace itself, what was used, what was the tool calls. In this case, it was looking for a Slack channel, and then eventually it posted to the Slack channel. So I'll show you the message and a few things that are pretty interesting. One, I installed the Claude Slack app, and it posted on my behalf, which is interesting.
Which is also an interesting one where I still think we need to figure out the right ACLs and the right way to represent an agent doing work for you as you, or an agent doing work as itself, in some way, managed by you.
Yeah. But the powerful thing is I made this agent in less than, honestly, 3 to 5 minutes. Yep. So it's powerful to just create this effectively agent that's connected to so many pipes. And I didn't actually touch any of the code.
That's fair. And this is also why I think code first wins in many places in the long run. And Anthropic knows this deeply. Even if you are not writing the code yourself, it's very easy to go from natural language to something that can configure itself in the background. Yep. The other part I really like about this UI, which I think will probably continue to evolve, is that it does try to be very clear on, for charging purposes, I believe, on when is it using the sandbox versus when is it not. When is the model running versus when is the actual, when's inference running versus when is the sandbox running versus, a variety of other things here, because they do charge you separately for these things. There's the standard tokens in, tokens out charge, but there's also 8 cents an hour sandbox charge, which I'm sure will change depending on what you end up picking in the future.
And they have separate pricing for when you use their tool specifically.
Right.
So web fetch and web search.
Right. Exactly. I'll also quickly touch on how do we do this in a code first manner if you just want to write the code yourself. We really should all have agents creating agents, agents debugging agents, turtles all the way down and all that. So this is a very simple view of I want to create an agent and I want to send a session to it. So this is classic type of, Anthropic SDK, API. If we want to send a session to an agent that we already created, we do both need the agent ID and the environment ID to create a new session. If you already have a session running, you can just send it directly to that session. but it's not too complicated. This will look very familiar to anyone who's been using the messages API and all of those things. And then results come back in a streamed way. But the more fun thing to me was that I started writing all these things, and I decided to write an MCP server that does them for me instead to create agents. So I'll give you a quick preview of the kind of things that are there. It's an MCP server. It's a plugin. So MCP server plus skills. This is one of the skills for actually building and deploying an agent. And what I can do here is I can let Claude deploy agents, my local Claude deploy agents to the cloud. So this is, you can see I have a MCP server running right now, or a plugin running right now, which is the Manage Agents Manager. That sounds good, I'm sure. And I can say create, or let's see, what manage agents do I have running right now? And it should be smart enough to go and look at my Manage Agents service using the plugin.
And while you're at it, let's do a command plus plus. Just to zoom in.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
There we go. It's able to actually tell me that I have a joke teller agent running right now. And if I want to create a new agent, great. Let's create a new deep research agent and deploy it when you're ready. Let's see what it does. This is going to, the layer that I have right now will talk to every, using the Python SDK that they have provided and updated, should be able to be smart enough to create a configuration for this agent, and then go and deploy it with the API key that we have. We can see that it did make an error along the way, but everything else looks okay so far. This is one of those things where every time you try to create a skill or you create a plugin or an MCP server, you're always iterating a little bit to tweak it so that it doesn't have to take these multiple steps every single time. Sometimes that's examples, sometimes that's just guidance in the prompt. But it's actually pretty nice that it already creates the blueprint for you, so it's kind of emulating a little bit of that quick start, but something that you can tweak yourself. Look at that.
Oh yeah, so that's the agent definition.
Did full agent definition without me having to remember what the JSON is.
Yeah. So part of it is you can kind of go through the quick start, but you're just doing it in Claude, in the environment you're already in.
Right, and to me, especially if I'm going to be iterating on a number of background agents that are out there, I want to do that where I'm coding already. That might be Claude, that might be Codex, that might be Cursor, that might be any number of things that I'm running. It's also nice because when you're ready to debug problems, having this all accessible through your local environment also makes it very easy for you to go and say, hey, I have an agent running right now. What's going on? Can you help me fix it and redeploy it? A little bit like many of us use the Datadog MCP server for our existing code bases if we're going and debugging what's going on. Lovely, look at that. We already deployed an agent. Let's go see if that's actually running. Okay, let's see what agents do we have. We've got a deep researcher now, and we have the joke teller. Deep researcher in that quick time frame was able to be deployed, and we have a smoke test running. Pretty cool, without me having to do a ton. I actually really like the ergonomics of the SDK so far. Not that I'm writing a lot of it by hand, but it's been pretty easy to add this kind of extra very quick layer for me to deploy and play around with the agents that are running inside my platform.
One thing that I expect Anthropic to build that I didn't quite see with the initial launch is the notion of triggers or connecting things to events. So right now, you're still the individual who is invoking these agents. Like, yes, we just showed you that, you can invoke it via MCP, via the SDK, but you're manually getting the ID of the agent, the session, and deciding when to invoke it via code, as opposed to, in the future, I hope, that you can get triggers from Linear, from Jira, from GitHub, and then connect them to invoking agents.
I'm sure they're adding that in. I'd also call out things like this where it's like, I need to send an end session message, all kind of things that I think will actually probably be more automated or like easier to integrate with depending on the task that you're completing. And even if they don't do it, this is something where offering it through an API and offering it through an SDK makes it very easy for a number of companies to do this work. I expect we'll see a proliferation of folks who integrate quickly with the new Agents SDK, Managed Agents SDK, and who might add some of those niceties on top.
That makes sense. Cool. Anything else you want to
add? No, I mean, well, I guess the last thing is I am pretty excited to see this thing out. I think the Managed Agents SDK and the Managed Agents platform overall is going to make it a lot easier for people to do more background agents.
Yep.
And I'm pretty bullish on background agents. I don't think we should have to see a bunch of devs carrying their laptops open around. So this will be a nice thing to start pushing people towards. You don't need to be running everything locally.
Yeah.
Run what you need to locally that humans interact with. Mm-hmm. But whenever we're talking agent first, whenever we're talking proactive, whenever we're talking background, mm-hmm. we should be seeing more and more of these kind of managed agent platforms out there. Very excited to see Anthropic getting into this.
Talk to you all later. Take care.